Hello, friends, and welcome to Weekly Witness, Texas Impact's weekly podcast designed to help mainstream Texans of faith understand the legislative process and to help you engage with public policy in the great state of Texas. My name is Scott Atnip, your host and Texas Impact's Director of Public Witness, and we are bringing you content from Moorhead and part of the Texas Impact delegation who are participating in the United Nations climate negotiations known as COP30 in Belém, Brazil. Our team on the ground is churning out some great content from the COP, and things are moving quickly. So make sure that you're following along on Texas Impact Substack and YouTube, as well as through Texas Impact's media partnerships with the Austin Chronicle, Baptist News Global, and United Methodist Insight. This content is important to help us understand the global climate emergency and how the negotiations can shape our future work at the federal, state, and local levels, as well as in the corporate, NGO, and faith community spaces, and help us understand the role the faith community plays in that work. Y'all, there is so much going on in the world, and people of faith are stepping up in every sphere. Here at home, we see congregations responding to unprecedented food insecurity needs. In my community, an Episcopal priest was detained by ICE, and communities of faith are trying to figure out how to respond. And we all need to be paying attention to the candidate filing period here in Texas. There is so much going on, and we're called to respond. So I hope you enjoyed this week's conversation from our team in Belém and use the time to think about how you and your congregation can respond to the climate crisis that impacts everyone across the globe.
Good morning from Belém, Brazil. I'm Moorhead. I'm joined with...
Good morning. I'm Becca Edwards from Texas Impact.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dylan Lay, also from Texas Impact, Policy Fellow here.
Regina Banks, Director of the Lutheran Office of Public Policy, California.
We are the first week team of Texas Impact and Friends at COP, and we're recording just a kitchen table conversation about how the COP has been going so far and what folks ought to be watching of the videos we've already sent and what you can be watching for next week as we go into the second week. So, Regina, what do you think? What have you heard so far that's interesting?
I got to be honest with you. I have not felt out the personality of this COP yet. I've had the opportunity to attend 6 so far, 6 consecutive. I thought I came into this kind of understanding a rhythm of how these go, and it just hasn't unfolded the way that it typically has. And I haven't really worked out a reason for what that could be. There's the little voice in the back of my mind that says maybe it's the absence of the U.S. State Department being here. Like that is when a big player is not at the game, it changes the tenor of the game, and that could be it. It could be that. It could be nothing. I could be misreading it, but that's my general sense, is that it's a little off.
It's a little off. Dylan, this is your first COP. What's your first impression?
Being my first COP, I would say that, like Regina said, I'm still looking at what's to be said of the COP. You know, we're halfway through, so I don't know if we can make any conclusive statements yet, but I would say that so far, what is going on at the negotiation space is sort of indicative of how we need to be approaching climate change prevention within our own country, which means that subnational groups have been making significant strides. You know, I've met with tons of individual people from countries at particular levels of government, but when it comes to the national level, we still see much to be desired, especially from all countries.
Much to be desired. What do you think?
Well, as a faith-based advocate, I've been super excited by the emphasis on morals and ethics at this COP. I know before we came, we kind of had they released a lot of documents and letters about the concept of mutirão, which is a Brazilian word that describes collective action. And last night we went to a great session about the global ethical stocktake, which is a new thing that's happening this year that they hope to make a permanent part of the COP process, where it's sort of a worldwide assessment of the morals and ethics of climate change, where we're at on that front. And I think that's a really important development. But I've seen that same spirit of mutirão through negotiations and consultations where there's this emphasis on collective action, community spirit, and working together in an international way. The new multilateralism, I think.
The new multilateralism. Yeah, I am loving the new multilateralism. The thing I keep thinking is there's all this conversation about subnational. Often when we come to the COP, so this is my, 8th, I guess, COP. I come home wanting to encourage people in the United States, in Texas, to be engaged at the international level. Like I want them to understand we're not alone. We're part of a global community and you need to understand how that is. This year, and it's potentially because of the conversation about subnationals and multilateralism, I'm feeling like what I'm going home from this COP with is probably going to be a lot of, hey, Texas legislature, I have some ideas for you. I know some things you could do that might make our processes better, more inclusive, more likely to result in consensus, or at least nearer to consensus. So that's been very interesting for me.
This has been the first COP that I can remember that I've been in an official event and other people in the crowd have mentioned California state legislation that we have worked on at LOPP, mentioned in the international space. And I was so proud. I was so proud. I felt so much more empowered thinking about the days that I have gone into our state legislature and looked at the same people I run into day in and day out, just doing my job. It translates way up. It's not just that it might be heard in Washington, D.C. It might be heard in Belém. So if you're out there and you're listening and you're thinking, what does it matter that my county is passing this green ordinance or my state is going to have a bill on water recycling? Those are going to be the measures that get us where we need to go.
Exactly. And I just have to say, we also got a special shout out for Austin, Texas in that event. Yes. So yeah, but yes, I think the thing that's been interesting to me in that vein is the number of times from the plenaries down to the little side event rooms where people are saying the policy concept gets made here, but it's going to be implemented locally. It's not because anybody decides that it's going to be implemented locally. It's because that's how implementation happens, is locally. So several people have said, I think in that interview that you did with the Green Latinos vice president, and he was saying, in your community is where the water, the energy that you get at your house, the choices that we make about transportation, that's where those things happen.
Well, going off that same vein, something that seemed very interesting to me so far is that when we have this discussion of subnational governments and international engagement, we don't have to be thinking about these two things as separate. One of the interesting things that stood out to me on a panel that I went to recently on climate adaptation was that National Geographic does a lot of grant funding specifically directed to individuals. The idea is that you're going to give a very experienced individual that is focused on local action grants to begin their climate adaptation initiatives. And once that initiative proves to be successful and effective, you scale it up to the national level and then international, because we start by analyzing what's the most effective way to deal with said very specific climate problem in a localized area. And we can be thinking about it simultaneously in this local and international context.
Absolutely. And when we went to the one on climate migration, we heard some of that same, Uganda is doing a particular cooperative initiative with solar cookers that is helping migrant climate refugees from South Sudan avoid sexual violence by not having to go far out into the woods to get cooking fuel. So yeah, it really is like from the local to the global. In Texas, at the University of Texas, where some of us have our degrees from, the slogan is what starts here changes the world. And I think it's that simultaneous, what starts out in the world could come change you too.
Something Gavin Newsom said, the governor of California, when we were at that session a couple of days ago, was that we should be thinking about power as coming from the bottom and going up. And I think that reflects what y'all are talking about, which is that this local implementation is the thing that we need to scale up to coalesce into a larger movement for climate action in the US. And I think that's probably a really hopeful message for people who are feeling really frustrated by the way we haven't been able to move the needle on climate federally in decades.
100%.
At the risk of sounding incredibly hokey, and he's my governor, and I was very proud of my governor in that space. And definitely power comes from the bottom up. But as a faith-based advocate, I think we're noticing that we've gotten all the way to COP30, 10 years after the Paris Agreement. Things are not working as quickly as the world thought that it should. And finally, it's dawning on us that there's ethics and morals and spirit undergirding all of the work that we're doing. So from the bottom up and from the inside out.
Oh man,
Absolutely.
That'll preach. But now, so not to sort of rain on everyone's parade, but there's another thing that Regina and I have had a conversation about several times over the years, which is, and you and I, Becca, have talked about this too, the myth of the individual as the primary driver, right? And so, and I think I can't remember who wrote the article, maybe Bill McKibben recently, on you were sold a bill of goods. Oh no, Jin Ball from an Evangelical Environmental Network wrote a substack piece where he is talking about you were sold a bill of goods that your carbon footprint was responsible for the death of millions of people, right?
Right.
You, your own personal self, sure, should do the things that are ethical and moral in your context, but you're not eating that strawberry. I remember, but listen, I remember 25 years ago being at a meeting of faith communities, interfaith community in the United States. There were, 100 people there. And I remember being in line to get food and one of the women saying to the other, what do you suppose the carbon budget is on this strawberry? But sure. This is local fruit, and we for sure want to try to, we are enjoying the local fruit. And I did, it's true, pick up several tiny mangoes off the street, and I do plan to eat them. But the way that we get that stuff is through policy. The way that we get, honestly, the way in Texas that we get local food is because HEB, the founder of Everybody's Feast in Texas, is making sure that it's happening. Yeah. And so when people are wondering, like, what can I do? I would just say, don't worry so much about whether you should eat that strawberry. Worry about whether you should go to that city council meeting.
Amen. So one thing I always used to tell my students when I was in the classroom, because they were super idealistic, as students tend to be, and would kind of be the strawberry people, right? Sure. I used to tell them that the systems we live in govern what choices we have. Yeah. And for example, I'm not able to afford a house close to my job because we're in central Austin. So I have no choice but to drive to work because the system that we have means we don't have the kind of public transportation that I can be flexible and rely on to access my job and also be available for my family when needed. So that's why, another reason, it's so important to engage in policy making at all levels. And I think maybe a city council meeting or even an HOA meeting is a great place to start if you're feeling intimidated by this process.
Dylan, as the youngest person here at the table, I mean, how do you feel like, do you get tired of being the youngest person here at the table?
I keep calling me.
You should enjoy it while you got it. But do you feel like that distinction between individual direct action and individual policy advocacy, how does that resonate with your peers?
I think it resonates a lot because young people are among one of the, you could say, most affected demographics in the sense that we're going to see some of the worst effects of climate change in our lifetimes, right? And so the frustration is that the responsibility for that climate change seems to be entirely shifted on us as individuals, but it's like we inherited this system, right? So I think that, like you all mentioned, there needs to be a conversation about a holistic approach to climate prevention in the sense that we shouldn't, denigrate individual actions and say that they have no value, but at the same time, systemic change is what's really going to make the significant difference. And if we look at, for example, just carbon emissions, we know that there is an imbalance in, let's say, individuals using a gas oven and fossil fuel emissions from fossil fuel interests and companies, right? So I think that among young people, what a lot of people are feeling is that, yes, we all have a part to play and we are playing that part. It's now the time for fossil fuel companies and more powerful interests to take a collective responsibility as well.
Absolutely. And, the last thing I want to say about the intergenerational piece is it's been kind of a thing now for me because I have been doing this for 25 years to see that there's intergenerational change of leadership even in the process. So we got to see while we were here, you went and saw Al Gore.
Yes.
And then yesterday we also saw Corona Gore,
Yeah.
his daughter. We have people here who are the children of the people who established the UNFCCC, and we have people who are the children of the original faith leaders who were part of this movement, who've been in the work the whole time. And I think we have a colleague who Matthew Anderson, who one time said this really funny thing. He said, we keep acting, it was funny in the moment, but he said, we act like the youth are the ones who are going to clean everything up. Like we somehow made this big mess and the youth are going to clean everything up. And he said, the youth are who come babysit my daughters when I go out, and they are not in a position to clean everything up. They can't even open a bag of chips without making a mess. But the reality is, the people who are over 60 have 80% of the wealth. They are the people who are voting the most. They are the people who are in charge of the systems. It's not fair to say, so Dylan, do what you can. We're leaving this in your capable hands. You just take care of it.
I got it.
Well, okay, real quickly to wrap it up, because I know we've all got to get on to other things, but what do you expect? So Dylan and Becca, you're both going to be back in the U.S. next week, but I assume watching keenly what's going on. What are you going to be most watching for? What are you going to be texting us obsessively to ask about?
I am just curious to see how this, I know I keep talking about it, but the spirit of Butterau, what it does to change the negotiations. I've been to 2 other COPs and they have both ended with very conflicted feelings. And I think those conflicted feelings carry over all year until the next COP. And so we all start a little bit wary of each other. And I think hitting this emphasis on collective action hard in the beginning might yield benefits. I'm real curious to see how that pans out.
Yeah, I would say following that, in terms of collective action in the international system, I think there are just what's been discussed, bare minimums that we need to be hitting, because to me, this COP is not just restricted to climate change, which by itself is already this huge issue, but on this question of how effective is the international system going to be to deal with these possibly world-ending issues, So following up on that, I would just say that we need to see, again, we've heard this COP doesn't need to be a winner, but it just can't be a loser, right? A level of effectiveness to multilateralism and that it's still alive.
I have several consultations on my agenda today and tomorrow. So just the structure of the COP is such that the first week is a lot of table setting, and then we hear Like, how's everybody feeling? Okay, then we go into the second week and we look for those kinds of decisions. So today and tomorrow, I'm just taking temperature. Like, where in the informals that we're not a part of and that take place in other parts of the venue, those get formalized in places today and tomorrow. And so I think that will tell us the shape of what is still possible here in Belém.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I thought it was really an interesting moment Wednesday evening when the president of the COP said, we're here for the informal stock take to see how we're doing. And everyone was settled in. Like the whole room was full of people who were sitting down and got out their snacks. And he said, it's going great. We're having great conversations. We're going to keep having them. I'm not even going to open the floor for comments. Come back on Saturday after we've had more conversations. Like, wouldn't it be something if our legislative bodies could say, this chicken just isn't cooked yet. We're going to keep going for another hour. I mean,
sometimes that's actually great news.
Oh, great.
Because it means that they're talking to one another and the talking is productive. And I'm not going to say anything from this mic that's going to affect what the good work that's happening back there. So just sit tight. We'll come back to you on Saturday. So I'm
excited for Saturday. Same. All right. More soon.
All right, friends, I want to thank y'all for tuning in, and I especially want to thank our Texas Impact team and friends in Belém, and remind you once again to check out the continuing coverage of COP30 on Texas Impact Substack and YouTube, as well as on the pages of our media partners, the Austin Chronicle, Baptist News Global, and United Methodist Insight. There is a lot going on around the world, and Texas Impact is your partner for effective advocacy here in Texas and beyond. We have resources to help you be an effective advocate on our website at texasimpact.org. Check out the Action Center page, as well as Texas Impact's Texas Faith Votes campaign. Join one of our issue teams. Special shout out today for our Climate Action team. And encourage your congregation to get involved in all of the work. In addition to the website, make sure you check out our Substack and all of our social media channels, including the Ledge TV playlist on our YouTube channel, which is a great resource to help you share the story of what's happening. While you're on the website, I hope you'll take a moment to sign up to be a member of Texas Impact. Your membership supports this podcast and all of the work to engage Texans of faith to advocate for a more just and equitable Texas. It's a very effective and affordable way to put your values into action. So with that, I think it's time we close out this episode. So remember, the world needs Texans of faith active and engaged. So let's get to work.
Weekly Witness is hosted by Scott Atnet, engineered and produced by David Fasalo. Our executive producer is B. Moorhead. The opinions expressed on Weekly Witness are those of Texas Impact and our guests, and do not necessarily reflect the views of our sponsors. Weekly Witness is a product of Texas Impact, people of faith working for justice. Visit us online at texasimpact.org.